Hi, my name is Tony Armour,
Hi, I'm Andrew Vella.
and this is episode 2 of the Dallas Film and Creative Industries podcast. I feel like at some point we're going to come up with a better title than that for the podcast,
Yeah.
but for now, it is what it is, and we're going to keep rolling. But all that being said, we are excited today to have our first guest to the podcast, considering it's episode 2. Hopefully didn't scare anybody off. And
No.
so today we've got Michael E. Brown. Michael is a line producer, director, writer, a little bit of everything in the industry. He's been working his butt off over the last couple of years, doing a lot of projects.
Mhm.
Couple of projects coming up. The Storied Life of A.J. Fickery, and recently The Hating Game are a couple of films that he has worked on that come out. And then coming up later in 2023, a movie, A Taste of Love, that Michael wrote and directed with his business partner and creative partner, Conrad De La Torres. Michael, welcome to the show.
Welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Thanks for having me. This is exciting.
Yeah, so that was kind of like a brief little intro that we gave, or I gave, for you. But why don't you tell us a little mini bio,
Mm.
little something about yourself?
I mean, so born and raised in Florida, which has a lot to do with, I think, my career path in the film industry. There's not a whole lot of stuff that's taking place on the regular here, and so I think everybody that wants to get into the movie business kind of does whatever they can until they figure out their own way to get their foot in the door. And so, started out doing small commercials with a DSLR camera, and went to school at the same time. So, excuse me, I got a little bit of a cold, but and then I went to film school and met actually Tony Armour there, and developed a really good relationship with him. And then slowly but surely kind of started a small company and got more into the commercial space for a little while, and landing clients with Verizon and a couple other pretty big companies in the local area. And that kind of transitioned into the opportunity to partner at a company called Digital Caviar, founded by Todd Yontek. And he wanted to do films, which we all did. And so we kind of just came together and started focusing more on the film aspect of things. So we made a little film called Crazy Lake for like $30,000. Shot over 16 days, and it was everything that it should have been. It was a cool little project, and that opened up the door to bigger films, particularly down the path of production management and line producing, which is like my bread and butter, what pays the bills. But along the way, kept on writing and had the opportunity to write and direct a project called A Taste of Love recently, that shot in St. Pete, Clearwater, and we're in the process of selling it right now. And so that's kind of where where I'm at with everything. And line producing is what I do probably 2 to 3 times a year now, mostly out of state, not in Florida.
Yeah, and so it's interesting. So your career path, I think mirrors a lot of people in industry mirrors mine to a certain extent as well. Is that you just kind of get started and you just start making stuff, commercials
Mhm.
and music
Yep.
videos and whatever else, and then you slowly kind of build your way up into feature films.
Mm.
There's and it's
Right.
I think it's hard to tell people sometimes to be patient. That
Mhm.
you just literally have to put in the time, put in the work, and do a good job, and you can grow in the industry.
Yeah, yeah. And it's interesting because, you look at states that, are union forward, and oftentimes people's introduction to films is via IATSE or a crew member position. And so their path into the industry, kind of goes down that direction. And then here, or in non-union states, you kind of like have to be a little bit of a jack of all trades and like and kind of do your own thing, which is, it's a blessing and a curse. But it just kind of opens up the door to allow you to see just the many facets of making movies and what it takes to make it happen, and cutting your teeth on a lot of smaller projects. And hopefully you can make the transition into, bigger films, quote unquote, proper, like more industry standard films with bigger budgets.
Yeah, and Texas is very similar to Florida in that respect, in that it's a right to work state, and so of course you do of course have the unions here. And when you have a project that anytime you're over $1 million on on a film or a project or something, you're shooting union. It is what it is.
Yep.
You're not going to
Yep.
be able to do it under that. And if you're
Right.
shooting under that, you're shooting low budget, 400, $500,000, $30,000
Right.
films. You're clearly not going to be using union crew for that.
Mhm.
So, you
Right.
mentioned that your bread and butter is as a line producer. So I imagine maybe some people that are listening don't know what a line producer is. So why don't you tell us what do you actually do as a line producer? Episode 1, when we had to explain what actually a film commissioner is and what a
Mhm.
film commission does.
Yeah. What does your day-to-day look like? Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. A line producer is the equivalent, and I don't know if I'm going to do any justice. I'll digress before I come back to it, but is equivalent of like a contractor. So my job is literally the main producers hire me to come in on board and literally build the entire project, from financing, working with them. They'll acquire the financing, but I put the budgets together, make sure that financing is everything's lined up on the paperwork side. I start the company. I've bid out insurance, everything that you could think of to start the film, production office space, etc., and then manage the project to make sure that if everybody's on track, that the film stays on budget and on schedule.
Mhm.
So you're the guy that's controlling all the money basically to
Mhm.
making sure everything flows properly and that you don't end up over budget when you're shooting.
Correct. Every single vendor that comes on board is negotiated by my position or production manager. Sometimes, I collaborate with them. I hire a production manager, but oftentimes the bigger deals specifically, and all of the crew deals and everything like that, are at least they're put together by me and negotiated by me, and or at least approved by me. Even the actors, uh, like larger actors deals, are ultimately approved by me, making sure that they're on budget. And if obviously they're not on budget, then there's somebody above me that says, hey, we're willing to make that happen. But I have to make sure everything's falling in line with what we've all agreed upon financially.
Well, that's
Mm.
kind of a big deal. That's kind of an important thing,
Mhm.
because if you don't spend your money properly on a shoot, your shoot's not getting made.
Yep.
So most recently, the two films you've worked on most recently were The Hating Game and The Storied Life of AJ Fickery. Why don't you tell us just a little bit about those two particular films, and maybe I'll drill down and ask you a little bit more on the technical side of stuff. But tell us about those films, getting those films made, and sort of where they're at. They've been released now, and kind of what's going on with those.
Yeah, yeah, and actually, a more recent one that I just finished up with is in post right now, which brings me to you as well. Um, which all three films are for a company called BCDF, managed and owned by Brian Keaty and Claude Delfara, guys, and really have a solid business model. One of their projects, by the way, which was to Leslie, they got nominated or was nominated for a Best Actress. So they got a really good thing going on over there. But so yeah, I mean, pretty much, um, all three of those projects, similar in the business model, in which they were based off of a best-selling book, and that was adapted to a screenplay. And then from there, they worked with a company, and we'll get into the specifics, from a sales side of things, to land a specific number of which we had to make the film for, all three films. And so essentially, what happens at that point is once that number is established, then you ultimately go out and you find financing via private equity, slash debt, or working with the bank or something like that, to finance the film based off of that number. And everything at that point just needs to fall in line. You don't get more money. It's not like, oh, we're a big studio, we went over by $1 million, can we go? It doesn't happen. And so oftentimes these films are bonded, which is a completion bond, and you have insurance to make sure that they don't go over. So it's a very specific process, in making sure that they happen on time and on budget.
So, and a quick note, to Leslie, the film that you just mentioned,
Mhm.
is actually about takes place in Texas. So,
Well,
little shout out for Texas
is
there.
What town? West?
yeah, West
Yeah.
Texas. So it's not Dallas, but that's all good. You know,
Yeah.
this is we're all about Texas here.
Yeah. What's going on with that film?
Mike
It's
smile at me,
crazy.
and be like, "You're the Florida guy. What are you talking about Texas?"
No, he's a
Like,
Texas
I'm
guy
Texas now, Mike.
Uh,
I'm
you're all
Texas
grown
now.
up, Tony. You're all grown up. I remember when you were in
Tony
St. Pete.
Tony is what the locals call a Dallasite now.
A Dallas site. I don't know.
Yeah.
I've only been here a month and a half. It's maybe not quite.
But you've experienced heat, cold, ice, and a little bit of snow.
You know what? We haven't hit that 100-degree heat yet.
Oh,
I
yeah.
haven't done
That'll
that
be
yet.
brutal.
So we'll wait and see. I might have to go on vacation those 3 months of the year. So you know what? Something that you mentioned that I think is really important is, you know, there's no more money. Like if this is your budget, okay, your budget is $4 million and you're at
Yeah.
3.9 million and you've got, you know, however much left to go. You can't get more money. You're not squeezing more money. There's no studio to get. What do you do in a situation
Mhm.
where, because obviously you don't, you know, come onto the, you know, with the last week of filming and realize that you're out of money with a week to go. You know, if you're a good line producer, which I know you are, you're not getting to that point in the project where you're all out of cash. So, you know, you're going to see that ahead of time. You know, you see that a few weeks out, a month out, whatever it is in pre-production before you start filming. What do you do when you have to have that conversation with the director or the producers or the financiers and say, "Hey, this is the money that we have, but what you want to do, we can't do with that much money." How do you
Right.
handle that?
What happens when things go bad?
Yeah. You know, and every movie's different. You know, it's not a carte blanche. You know, you don't get more money, but oftentimes it is. And in those scenarios where you don't, you know, like you just, it's just not even an option. It's not a very fun conversation because you start talking. The only thing that you have to do, it's left to do at that point, is start cutting creatively whatever you can that's going to cost money. And so, you know, should you arrive at that point where it's just not going good, usually a contributor to that, if it was a good budget to begin with, is like, you know, you weren't making your days, or we were doing a lot of overtime because, you know, the day just wasn't going as planned, that kind of thing. Then you literally have to go into the script and whatever's left, figure out what you can take out without absolutely butchering the movie. And it involves a lot of big decisions between financiers, producers, and the creative director to see and how to make it happen. And sometimes there's scenarios in which it doesn't even matter creatively if it makes sense. You just have to do what you can to finish the movie and hope that you can edit it together at the very end. And that's the worst case scenario.
Yeah, and that's really interesting because so many times, you know, you see a movie and you're like, "Man, this had these actors, it had this director, you know, how did it turn out so bad?"
Mhm. Or it's like the
Right.
ending fell off. Maybe this is why.
Right.
Right.
The
Yeah.
budget fell apart at the
Yeah,
end.
like it was so good up until the last 15 minutes of the film. What happened to this thing?
Right. Yeah. I'm there's so many times when I look at like usually like independent films, and I could tell when a movie like started to like feel the pressure of a budget,
Oh wow.
you know,
Yeah.
because there's just a drastic change in the way that it looks, the way that it feels, the pacing, everything.
Mhm.
And oftentimes, believe it or not, like you're talking about like the ending of the movie or whatever, in a perfect world, you're not shooting the ending of your movie up front. You usually try to wait to shoot the end of the movie at the end of the film because it's a big deal and you don't want your actors to jump into the big conclusion right off the bat from a process standpoint. And so because of that, sometimes the ending of the movie is changed because there's not enough money to finish it the way they wanted to finish it.
Mm.
Yeah, that you know, it kind of makes you think a little bit about too, you know, just when you're seeing something
Yeah.
and you're like, okay, this was an award-winning script, or I read this script, you know, before it was made. That just there's something you want to happen doesn't mean that's necessarily gonna happen. You know,
Mhm.
once you get into the process.
Right. Yeah. It's a big collaboration, you know, and ultimately at the end of the day, my job as a line producer um doesn't necessarily involve a whole lot of creative input. But I've kind of made a name for myself a little bit by obviously being able to contribute creatively to the process from a financial perspective. And so when you collaborate with directors on like, well, you know, I can't afford this massive car explosion, but maybe we can do something like this that gets you somewhere close. And all of a sudden people are like, oh man, well, that's cool, that's awesome. And you know how much that costs, so you can present it in a way that isn't going to ruffle any feathers, and so
Mm,
being able to understand that process really helps out.
Well,
mm,
and sometimes, there are scenarios where it actually works out better. So maybe most famously is Jaws, right? Like they're shooting Jaws and they couldn't get the shark to work and they're having
Yeah.
all these huge problems, and so they basically shoot the movie, most of the movie, without the shark, and it's the tension and it's the suspense
Right.
of and
Mm,
the
Right.
anticipation that the shark is going to get you that
yeah.
makes that particular film instead of seeing the shark in the entire movie. So yeah, it can end up bad, but at the same time, okay, if it's done creatively well,
Yeah.
it can turn out really good as in the same.
That's what everybody usually says to themselves at the end of those meetings with me when it's not going good. And they're like, well, there was Jaws. And you're like, okay, yeah, yeah.
And
My
so you're in those meetings and they say that, and then you say, "No, that's garbage."
so Michael, I have a question for you. So you hear so often from directors or actors as they watch a movie, it changes things for them. Like they're watching, for example, Avatar, and as a director watching Avatar, who isn't James Cameron, you might think, "Oh, he could have done it this way." As a line
Mhm.
producer, are you watching films with that lens as well, or or are you able to still enjoy films?
Um,
I mean, yes, you enjoy films, but do you watch it with a different
right.
lens, being so like entrenched in the film process?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, I think every person that contributes to a film probably watches it through their own unique lens.
Mm,
I'm actually very much removed from the everyday on-set minute by minute process. And because of just the general nature of my job, I'm bird's eye view and making sure that things are all in place from from way up there. And so I'm not on set as much as some other people are. And so I don't get to see like every single little problem that goes wrong, within a take or whatever the case may be. um, but you kind of look at it the way that I feel like as a line producer sometimes is like you look back and you recognize those moments that somebody wanted something and
mm,
we weren't able to do it a certain way. And when it ends up being recognizable, like as maybe it didn't turn out good because of that, that's when it hurts the most. Right. Like,
oh,
because you're like,
gotcha.
man, I know that this was the thing that we really wanted to do. And that would have been the thing that was needed in order to make this moment better. And we couldn't do it because of money.
Yeah.
Right. And then you start to kind of be like, oh, well, I mean, in some way, shape, or form, it's my fault because I said you couldn't do it. But that's my job.
Yeah.
It's I'm hired to make those decisions, and that's comes with the territory, I suppose.
Well, and no one ever sets out or intends to make a bad movie or to make bad decisions in a
Mm,
film so that things aren't the way they want it to be. It's
Right.
it's it's the process, the literal collaborative process of, doing it. Now if you're, making an animated film, you can blow up anything you want, right? You just
Right.
draw it. Now some animator's going to call in or send us an email and be like,
it's not that
that
easy.
is wrong. It's not that easy. Yes, I understand that there is a lot more to it than that. Maybe that wasn't the best example in the world.
Right.
Don't send me hate mail, animators. But just to say that, something like that, like animation, can be simpler because you're not necessarily worrying about a special effects
No.
budget or whatever,
Right.
whatever else it might be. So, all
Yeah.
that being said, you're obviously, talking very much about the business side of it and what it takes to get projects done. But you're also creative as well. You're also a director and a writer, and you've got a film, A Taste of Love, that will
Mhm.
be coming out hopefully sometime 2023. Why don't you
Yep.
tell us a little bit about that film? Who's in it? What's it about? And kind of what you did there?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So Taste of Love was kind of a family friendly romantic comedy that was born here in St. Petersburg, Clearwater. My business partner and I decided to kind of take a crack at a film like that, a script like that, after some conversations with Tony and seeing some other projects that we're shooting in the area. And so we put this film together called A Taste of Love, like based off of, or excuse me, it's centered all around food because I'm a big foodie. And and starring Aaron Cahill and Jesse Cove and Marty Cove from Cobra Kai and Karate Kid back in the day.
Aaron
And
Cahill, the Power Ranger, right?
What's that?
She was the Power Ranger,
Yeah, that's
Iron
yeah,
Commander.
Power Ranger.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah,
Power Ranger and now basically a Hallmark Channel star. Like
yeah.
she
Yep.
actually just signed an exclusive deal with Hallmark, I think a few
Oh,
months
wow.
ago, where they've locked her in and said, and I think Mike, this is congratulations to you. You got this deal for her essentially. They saw that she was making a film that was not in the Hallmark family and they're like, we don't want her doing anything outside the Hallmark family. And so it kind of I think because of A Taste of Love, they're like, we're gonna lock her in so she can only do those Hallmark films.
Hey,
Mm,
well, there you go. But yeah, and so and so we wrote this script and it actually got shelved for a little while. And then COVID hit and an opportunity came up to take it off the shelf and kind of blow the dust off. And Tony at the time was looking at kind of doing something unique and very different with the business model here in St. Pete Clearwater, the Film Commission, and I was looking at a couple different scripts that kind of stood out in regards to really highlighting specific areas in St. Petersburg, Clearwater. This particular place was Dunedin, and really just kind of making it, for lack of a better term, a movie that was pretty much a commercial for the area. And every single little location that we had in this script was organically a restaurant, some place of business, all within this very small area called Dunedin, and absolutely beautiful on the water, everything like that. And so the script worked out. It just was perfect timing, and it fit that business model. And so we had the opportunity to partner with the St. Petersburg Clearwater Film Commission to make the movie and bring it to life. And so once we got that approved, we kind of raised the rest of the financing, which was was a little process, and then we casted it. And for the first time, my business partner and I, Conrad, we got to direct a feature film, which was really cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. And
Congrats.
that's, circling it back to Dallas a little bit, that's, one of the things I want to do here in Dallas is
Mhm,
make films like that that really highlight Dallas and highlight this community
mhm.
in this area, using that business model that I know is successful and doing that kind of thing here. So, Mike, talk a little bit about the process of so you directed commercials, you'd line produced, you directed short films, you've written a lot of projects, but this was directing your first feature. Going into this, what did you expect, and then
Mhm.
what didn't you expect
Yeah.
that you kind of learned in that process as a first time feature director?
It's interesting because I had been around movie sets, and how the process works, and so it's hard because you got multiple hats on, right? And so the biggest thing was learning how to take off the hat of a producer and line producer and let your team do that and focus on just being the director, because you kind of default by nature to things that might not necessarily push the creative envelope, because that it's a big ask financially or whatever the case may be. And so you kind of, like, in the beginning, you're like, oh, no, I completely understand that that's difficult. So we'll go a different direction. But as a director, it's important to understand that stuff because it only helps you at the end. But you still have to be able to fight for what you believe in, because it's your story, it's your process. And if you're not present and you're not fighting for it, then it's going to lack the soul that it needs in order to be a good and successful film. And so
Mhm,
learning how to take off those hats and let my team do that and focus on just specifically the directing part of it was probably the biggest
mm.
biggest learning curve.
So, so I have a question for you. We're in touch with a lot of local filmmakers here in Dallas, being the Film Commission, obviously. And one of the things I hear a lot is it's harder to make a feature film than it is to make or it's harder to make a short film than it is to make a feature film. Do you agree with that? And maybe talk about like the big differences between making a short film versus a feature.
Yeah, I you know there's no specific answer for any, any approach. Every project is different. And so I don't know from what perspective somebody's saying it's more difficult to make a short
Mhm.
film than a feature film. They might be saying, "Hey, I have only $1 to my name, and
Yeah.
this feature film over there has $200,000. I could do so much with $200,000." And you can't argue that maybe in their own respect that's right, right?
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, to say that a short film is harder than a feature film is, I wouldn't say it's accurate,
Mhm.
because there's just and it depends on the size of the feature film too, but there's so many variables. And we could
Mhm.
spend a lot of time diving into those variables there, but it just depends on what you have access to.
Yeah,
Some
I'm
people don't need a single dollar because they have a lot of good friends that are in the industry.
Yeah.
They've got the equipment, they already own it, and they have access to good actors, whether they're recognizable or not, that they can come together and just really have fun and make this thing over a period of a week or two.
Yeah, I'm
Other
gonna I'm gonna agree
people,
with you. I'm gonna
Mhm.
agree with you on that one. You know, 100,
oh,
100%. You know, and like you said, is it harder for somebody to make a short film because they're trying to make a $50,000 short film and there's
Mhm.
no way that their investors will ever make their money back? Or you make you make a feature film. Oh, you've got the money because you have the investors, whatever, because there's a plan or a path to making their money back, and so when you make that, it's easier. But even from a logistical standpoint, you shoot a short film in a week or 3 days or 4 days or whatever it might be, as opposed to 20 days with a month of pre-production. Like feature film's way harder,
Yeah.
right, right.
from that perspective.
And define success as well, right? Like, a short film, is, in its very nature is designed to probably showcase an idea and probably showcase the director's ability and or the crew members and actors, right? But it's not necessarily financially responsible to anybody, usually because people know that they're going to put money into it and they're not going to get any money back. A feature film has the burden most of the time of having to be successful. And if it's not successful, that means somebody loses lots of money, which is its own thing.
Yeah, and that's something, that if you have an investor that loses money on a project, the problem is after that, they're not gonna put any money
Mhm.
into another project. That's the big thing.
Right.
You've basically taken that investor out of the independent film world investor pool that could have benefited the industry or benefited somebody else because they're like, "Ah, you know what? I did that once. I lost $100,000 or $1,000,000 or whatever it might be.
Right.
I'm good. I don't need to
Yeah.
do that again. I had some fun with it. I'm gonna go buy some real estate and, throw this in a 401k or something instead because
Right.
I know I'm getting some money back there." So, over the years, you've worked on a lot of stuff and really, kind of built up your career, worked with a variety of actors and different people and things like that. Kevin Smith on Kilroy Was Here, and that particular film, which I don't know what the business model was for that coming out. I thought I saw somewhere that there was gonna be some sort of release for that. I'm not sure where or what that is or what he's doing with that. But what was that like working with Mr. Smith, good old Kevin Smith on that film, the renowned
Yeah.
independent filmmaker?
He was just
Yeah.
here.
And Kevin Smith is awesome. He's an amazing guy. The film was actually the first film to be released and purchasable or watchable. I'm going to butcher this a little bit, but with like Bitcoin, with electronic currency, or
Wow.
yeah, it's something to those tunes there. So it's out there and available to watch. If you have Bitcoin or Litecoin or whatever those million other coins that are out. But yeah, I mean, Kevin Smith was absolutely amazing. He's the biggest director that I ever worked with, and it was really cool to see somebody of that caliber, in their own little world and see their process. And he had agreed to originally do Kilroy Was Here as a short film for Ringling College down in Sarasota, and it turned into, I think he enjoyed the process so much so that he turned it into a feature length movie by essentially shooting this thing in three segments. So he came down three times. So we essentially shut down or ramped up, shut down three times in order to make this feature film, which is its own weird thing. But yeah, it came together and it was really cool. And it was really cool to see him and his team work, and such a laid back person, which sometimes you don't get with directors. And he was able to pull magic out of the air just because he is who he is. and
Yeah,
that was
I
really fun
I
to
like
watch.
I was on set, a little bit for that particular one, and he'd be shooting, and the DP would set up the shots and everything, and be like, "You want to take a look?" He would take a look and be like, "It's perfect. It's great. Let's go. Let's shoot it." And
Yeah,
he would just rely on the DP to set up the shot and do the whole,
Okay.
make it okay. I trust you. I trust it's gonna look good.
right.
Yeah, let's go. Let's roll. Yeah, and he
Little
was
shout out to Brandon Hyde, who was the DP on those there. He did a great job putting it together. Yeah.
Yeah, Brandon definitely did a good job. Good
Yeah.
job on those on that project. He's done a lot of stuff over the years. You worked with him a lot on the Bernie the Dolphin films that were shot there as well.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. We kind of came up together. I first time I met Brandon was going back to your foot in the door into this whole world here. I answered a Facebook message of somebody saying they needed a gaffer for a short film. And I knew how to move lights, and so I thought I was, I didn't think I was a gaffer, but I said, yeah, let's do this. I can make it happen. And so I gaffed my first movie, and that's how I met Brandon Hyde, and that was at the very beginning of my career.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny, earlier on you had mentioned how you went to film school, and that's where you and I met. I was actually your professor, your instructor
What?
at the Art Institute
Yeah,
in
yeah,
Tampa.
So
Yeah.
so talk to me
yep.
about the difference between Tony Professor and Tony Film Commissioner.
Andrew wants the inside skinny now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So he came in. He didn't really have a whole lot to do with. He didn't know a whole lot. But he just kind of did his own thing. And like he played the. No, no. He was. It was interesting. I'm not trying I had to tread lightly here, but he was one of the best professors, or hands down the best professor at the school. And we connected because I knew right off the bat that he understood the process. He wasn't just kind of like, I don't know, faking the funk a little bit, read some books, or maybe shot a commercial or two, and then that was it. And at the time, I had already started my company, and I was actually making money shooting commercials when I went to film school. And so when somebody came in and actually knew what they were talking about, and what he specifically taught was producing, which was, I believe, a new class at the time, right, Tony? I think they had hired you to kind of to head this process.
Yeah, I
Um,
did, I taught producing, I did, like, some sort of film history class stuff as well,
right, that was the
and
second class you did, yeah.
yeah, and I did a few different other ones, on some other topics, but kind of producing was sort of
Right,
my main thing that I taught there because I approached it from the perspective of, "Oh, I've made stuff, like, actually made stuff,
right,
so
Mhm.
this is how the business side actually works." And
right.
the interesting thing about Mike, like, coming into school there too, it's not like he was an 18-year-old kid, like, you'd already been in the Navy for 5 years and, like, had gotten
Right.
out of the Navy, like, you were an adult person,
Yeah. Yeah, I was an adult, yeah,
yeah.
so it was, interesting going back to school, and I got a good amount out of it, but yeah. Yeah, and that's the thing, is that I recognized, from the producing side of things, that this was something that I didn't know, and so, I think I approached him afterwards, me and everything that I have done, and I'm pretty sure, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, Tony, but I was like, "Listen, man, I really respect you, and just let me know. I'll get you coffee if you want me to, man. But I like what you contributed, and I would love to learn more.
Yeah,
And
and I think it was, so it's the Mutual Admiration Society today apparently on the podcast here, because I recognized right away, the work that you turned in when you were shooting stuff, that you were clearly already far and above, like, what you would call a typical film student. You were already, working in the industry, making stuff, doing stuff, and so it was obvious that you were gonna do more, and it was cool and fun just to, it's hard to believe, was that 10 years ago, 11 years ago, something like that? Was that like 2012, 2013?
yeah, yeah, I had got out of the military in 2007, and I think it was right around 2000. I started my company in 2012, and almost immediately after that, or when, yeah, right around there, 2012, 2013.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So it was good.
11 years ago.
Yeah, I think it was good. It doesn't seem like it's been that long.
Yeah,
Because I recognized, again, we connect on a little bit of a different level because I wasn't talking to, like, 18 or 20-year-old students. Mike was, an adult who'd lived life and, was running a
Was in the
company,
Navy.
making a living, was in the Navy. And so, we could connect as friends and not just as, sort of professor to student kind of thing. And so it was great to then start working with you on projects and putting things together, like the Bernie the Dolphin films and that first that first feature film that you shot. That
Yeah.
that was an interesting story.
Yeah.
But that we won't get into in a public forum. But that's all right. That's when we for offline, offline
Yeah.
kind of stuff. But I
Awesome.
guess,
Yeah.
so what do you got coming up next? Obviously Taste of Love is going to be coming out later this year, but that's done. It's post-production, the film's done. You've moved on for that. Now it's really just waiting for the sales team to do their thing and for that movie to come out. But what do you see next? Not just,
Mm.
work-wise, but career-wise. What are you moving on
Mhm.
to?
Yeah. So like I mentioned, Which Brings Me to You was a film that's the most recent film that I line produced. That's in post right now. We just recently locked picture. Uh, so that'll be kind of, it's getting close to being finished. And Peter Hutchings is the director of that, and Brian and Claude are the producers of that. I think they've got quite a bit that they're excited about in 2023, and we really are a good team. So I have a feeling that something will probably pop up from that team. Around mid-year time frame is usually when I start to get feelers. And then a couple of other people that I work with have hit me up and said they got some stuff on the horizon. And so they usually have conversations with me early because I come on board early, and then you just kind of let them do their thing in order, until they get the green light. And so that's the line producing side. And from the creative side, there's a couple of scripts that I'm looking at right now, but for the first time ever in my career, I will probably be looking to option purchase a script and take a project from, it's early conception, if the script is good, all the way through delivery. And so I've produced on multiple levels, but I've never been the lead producer in charge of literally taking a project from paper to film to distribution. And so I'm betting a few projects to see which one I want to be my debut, but that's what I'm looking forward to in 2023.
Wow.
That's fun. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, you and I
Yeah.
will talk more about that. We've talked a little already, but
Bring it to
Yeah. Yeah.
Dallas.
more conversations on that. And absolutely,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
what we're gonna do to shoot that thing in Dallas. And you
Mm.
need
Yeah.
to update the IMDb, which brings me to you. They don't have you listed on the IMDb yet. You need to go in there and make some edits and
Yeah.
add yourself to that thing.
I need to add myself on there.
I know sometimes. Now, did you line to produce that one as well?
Line produce that one. Yeah.
Yeah. Add yourself there.
Yeah.
You gotta have those
Yeah.
up to date credits. Well, and
Most,
so it's
most of the
interesting.
time, most of the IMDb stuff you add yourself for the most part.
No, it's true. Yeah, it's true. And IMDb is weird like that in that it's literally everyone uses it as the resume for people, and it's so wildly, incredibly inaccurate at times. And
Yeah.
yet it's considered gospel too,
Yeah. Yeah. That's the truth. A lot of times people just literally like, oh, okay, so you're interested in doing X, Y, and Z, and the first thing they do is look on IMDb and they look up all your credits. It's a very good way to show what you've done, but most of the time, especially on indie films, if you have the production office bandwidth, there's somebody that's adding people to it, but majority of the time, somebody just creates the banner and then everybody goes on and adds themselves.
Yeah.
That's kind of the thing.
That's why you notice, if you look at the cast on a lot of indie films, like every single extra is on there because those extras are on there on IMDb adding themselves as extras on every single film. Do you think the production manager's going in and adding every single extra into for that film? So it's like, wow, they're just so detailed. They have 100 extras in here,
Yeah.
and the production
Yeah.
manager added every single person. Isn't that amazing? No,
Right.
they did it
Yeah.
themselves.
So are you looking to direct more in the new year as
Yeah.
well?
I think so with the right projects. I really do appreciate the producing contribution from a creative producing side of things.
Mhm.
I'll always love the business aspect of it because I think it's just kind of it's where I naturally just gravitate towards being just the way my brain works. But the creative side of like curating projects and like choosing what you want to define yourself with is an interesting aspect to me. Like these are the type of projects that I want to help make happen. And so producing is going to probably be where I spend most of my time. But if something, comes across the table, or if I write something, because I do enjoy writing, and I've got a few scripts actually that I've written with my business partner Conrad. But if those, kind of go somewhere, maybe they will, then, at that point, I'd love to dive back into directing.
Nice.
Well, awesome. Well,
Mm.
Mike, thank you for joining us today on the
Yeah.
Dallas Film and Creative Industries
Our first
podcast.
guest.
Yeah, our first
Thank
official
you.
guest. I hope everybody that is listening got something out of it. If you got any
Mhm.
questions or anything, shoot us an email at info@dallascreates.org.
Mhm.
Thank you for listening, and tune in for the next episode.